I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about Jon Anik explains why he thinks it's less than ideal for Jon Jones to be the UFC heavyweight champion. UFC commentator Jon Anik thinks the UFC has a problem with its current champions' availability, including Jon Jones. As the year 2023 crosses to its halfway point, UFC is beginning to set up the final. I wouldn't say the final event for 2023 yet. The company has announced the location and events up to UFC 294, which will be taking place in Abu Dhabi on October 21st. However, it's unclear what champions would defend their titles to end the year. The company has run into an issue where certain champions are waiting to defend their titles due to contract negotiations or an opponent's. I don't even know why they're waiting for. At one of the examples is UFC heavyweight champion Jon Jones, who won the title versus Cyril Gane via first round submission at UFC 285 on March 4th. What was that, 2 months ago? After the win, Jon Jones called out Stipe Miocic to fight him. I don't think he specifically said July. I can't remember, but I know he called out for a fight versus Stipe Miocic. The company, the UFC, tried to make the fight between Jon Jones and Miocic happen in the past, but failed in contract negotiation. And so far, UFC has failed to book the highly anticipated heavyweight matchup between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. While UFC tries to still book Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, potential title contenders Sergey Pavlovich, I think that's how you pronounce it, has to figure out what's next for him. He seemingly deserves a title opportunity after his win over Curtis Blades by TKO at UFC Fight Night 222 on April 22nd. However, Jones is not looking to fight Pavlovich and wants the Miocic fight because it adds more to Jon Jones' legacy. The situation hurts the UFC as they have to push. I don't really know if I agree with that. I'm gonna move on with that one because I don't agree that Jon Jones, you know, wanted to fight Stipe Miocic later on in the year is hurting the UFC. So I'm gonna just move on from that paragraph. Jon Anik on UFC champions not having fights. Okay, so this is where we really want to go to. Jon Anik spoke with trainer Ray Longo on the Anik and Kenny Florian podcast to talk about the UFC's issues with booking fights for champions. The conversation started when discussing the UFC wanted Aljamain Sterling to defend his belt versus Sean O'Malley at UFC 292 on August 19th after Aljamain Sterling defended his belt versus Henry Cejudo at UFC 288 May 6th. Like 3 months later. That seems pretty soon, especially because that Henry Cejudo Aljamain Sterling fight, that was a 5 round. I think, was it a split decision? I think it may have been a split decision victory, right? And it didn't disrespect title holders like Jon Jones, but admitted that the UFC has a problem getting title defenses. This is interesting. Divisionally, there are a lot of champions that aren't available right now, and there are a lot of belts that are being held up for one reason or another. Okay, Yuri Prochazka is going to be the next light heavyweight title challenger, but Jamal Hill would be seemingly ready to go. Jamal Hill fought in January, several months before Aljamain Sterling defended his bout versus Henry Cejudo, but it seems like they want to wait, they being the UFC, for Jamal Hill versus Yuri Prochazka. I kind of agree with that. Where's Jamal Hill? And it continued, Jon Jones is your heavyweight champion, right? Ideal in a lot of respects, but maybe less than ideal in a lot of other respects. Sergey Pavlovich would probably fight every 3 months. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We got to check the records with that one because I'm an MMA casual, but I don't think Sergey Pavlovich fought 4 times last year. I don't think Sergey Pavlovich's last fight was 3 months ago. So let's, this whole contender thing, and then when you become champion, everybody should slow down. I just even though I'm a casual, maybe I'm wrong, but I would totally disagree with the idea that Sergey Pavlovich is, being a champion or even as a contender has fought every 3 months. I don't know where that came from. It's unclear if the UFC will try to pivot to other potential challengers for champions like Jones or Hill if their opponents aren't ready. The company has some matchmaking decision to consider as they try to close out 2023 with multiple champions awaiting, to compete again. Is there anything else? Well, it's kind of a quick little article here. Hold on. What happened to the page? What happened to the page? This page is really freaking me out. Yeah, kind of a quick article. I mean, if you look at like the current champions right now, this page is absolutely just, is it me? What's going on? If you look at the current champions right now, Brandon Moreno, he hasn't fought in a while. His last fight was like in January. Aljamain Sterling, he defended his belt a few months ago, so we don't have to really talk about Aljamain Sterling. Alexander Volkanovski, Alexander Volkanovski last defended his featherweight belt. I believe that was last year, so it's been a while since Alexander Volkanovski defended his belt, but he fought for the lightweight championship in another pop up. Oh my goodness, there's so many pop ups. This page is just it's crazy. But yeah, Alexander Volkanovski last fought was in February, and that was for the lightweight championship. Islam Makhachev, he last fought in February. He's a lightweight champion. His next fight will be in October. That is what it is. What's his name? Leon Edwards, welterweight champion. He last fought in, I think that was March, maybe April, versus Kamaru Usman. We haven't heard about, the UFC announced that Kobe Covington's the number one contender, but we have no idea when Leon Edwards or Kobe Covington are going to fight, so we're waiting on that. The middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya, his last fight was, I believe, in April. I think that was in April. He knocked out He knocked out Alex Pereira, right? Alex Pereira is already scheduled for his next fight. He's moving up to the light heavyweight division to fight Jan Blachowicz, but Israel Adesanya isn't scheduled for his next fight. So, I'm not too crazy about Alex Pereira after, getting literally knocked out pretty cold in the second round of a fight in October to come back in, when's that fight, in August? I'm not too crazy about Alex Pereira coming back that soon, and fighting before Israel Adesanya. I don't understand. Israel Adesanya is most likely gonna fight in the September card in UFC Australia, so that's gonna happen. And then John Jones will most likely fight in in November. John Jones is looking for the fight, the legacy fight, the GOAT versus GOAT, the kind of the retirement fight. It seems like both fighters may retire after this fight. But John Jones wants to fight Stipe Miocic in New York, right? New York City. John Jones, born and raised in New York. So John Jones is most likely going to fight then, So, that answers all of the championships right now, but we don't have contenders for a few, we don't have a contender for, I don't think I mentioned Jamal Hill. Excuse me. That's embarrassing. Jamal Hill, light heavyweight champion. He fought Glover Teixeira in January. He won the belt in Brazil. But Jamal Hill hasn't been scheduled for a fight. They're waiting for Yuri Prochazka to come back. We don't know when he's going to come back. We haven't heard really any updates, hardcore updates. I believe he's back in training. He had shoulder surgery, I think, in December of last year. But we haven't heard any official updates about when that's going to happen. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. That fight hasn't been announced. So there's still a lot of fights, which is, it's good and bad. Hamzat Chimaev, we haven't heard anything about him. There's definitely a lot of fights the UFC is going to make. And that's good. When you look at the second half of this year, you already saw the card. UFC 291 is super stacked, super stacked. You would imagine the card in Abu Dhabi is going to be super stacked. Also, I think Andrew Tate's going to show up to that. So that's going to be a super stacked card. You would imagine the John Jones versus Stipe Miocic headlining in November in New York. That card is going to be super stacked. So there's going to be a lot of stacked cards. We just it's basically just a lot of a waiting game right now. Injuries, and logistics. Basically, a lot of injuries at the moment that the UFC is just waiting to get in some contract negotiations. Obviously with Miocic, I don't know what's happening with Leon Edwards, but I mean Leon Edwards just fought, so he's just looking to fight. I think he said he wanted to fight Kobe Covington in Abu Dhabi. So Leon Edwards most likely be on the Abu Dhabi card. Islam Makhachev would most likely be on the Abu Dhabi card. So that's happening. A lot of UFC champions are out, and like I said, I'm an MMA casual, so I don't follow everything that's happening. But when you look at all of the champions, you look at every single champion has, for the most part, an opponent that they could have a fight with that the UFC will most likely announced at the towards the end of this year. We got 6 more months, 7 more months in this year, so a lot of cards will be stacked towards the end of this year. But the good thing and the bad thing is that they have a lot of fighters available. A lot of the casual fans like myself are looking forward to fighters from Conor McGregor, John Jones, Islam Makhachev, Israel Adesanya, Leon Edwards, Kobe Covington, all these names, none of them have fights yet. Stipe Miocic, a lot of the casual fans will come back for those fights, but that's probably my reason, I would say, of what's going on for the championship picture in the UFC. But let me know your opinion of this story. I'm Jason, UFC, and today we had a story about UFC commentator Jon Anik explains why it's less than ideal for Jon Jones to be UFC heavyweight champion. His definition, basically, before we end this article, was that he thinks that Sergey Pavlovich would, it says, he says Jon Jones is your heavyweight champion, right? Is this Anik or is this Longo? Seems like Longo would be saying this, but Jon Jones is your ideal champion. Ideal in a lot of respects, but less than ideal for a lot of others. Sergey Pavlovich would probably fight every 3 months. You know what I mean? Wow. I just told you disagree with that. But hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.